The alarm buzzed through the control room of Deep Space Station Omega-7. Commander Veltar's long blue fingers moved across the holographic display with practiced ease. His species, the Zephyrians, had been watching the galaxy's borders for over 300 years. Most days brought nothing but empty space and distant stars. "Sir, we have an unknown contact," reported scanner technician Morek from her station. Her voice carried the usual boredom of someone who had seen countless false alarms. Single vessel, approaching from the outer rim. Veltar walked over to her console. The scanner showed a small dot moving slowly through space. He had seen this pattern many times before. Another primitive species had probably just discovered space travel and was now wandering around, not knowing where they were going. "Ship size?" he asked. "Small, sir. Maybe 200 meters long. The design is unusual." Veltar looked at the image that appeared on the main screen. The ship looked like someone had welded different pieces of metal together. It had no smooth curves like Zephyrian ships. Instead, it was all angles and straight lines, with strange bumps sticking out in odd places. "Definitely primitive," said Morek. "The hull appears to be made of simple iron alloys. No energy shields that I can detect. Their engine signature is, well, it's barely registering. Probably another species that just learned to leave their home planet," Veltar said with a sigh. "Run the standard identification protocol. Let's see what we're dealing with." The scanner went to work. Within minutes, data started flowing across the screens. The ship was called USS Liberty. It carried 12 crew members from a species that called themselves humans. Their home planet was something called Earth, located in a small system far from any major galactic powers. "Humans," Veltar repeated the word slowly. "Never heard of them. Are they in the galactic database?" Morek checked her records. "No, sir. This is first contact with this species. According to our scans, they've only had space travel for about 60 years, very new to the galaxy." Veltar nodded. The Zephyrian Empire had met dozens of young species over the centuries. Most followed the same pattern. They would develop basic space travel, send out a few exploration ships, and eventually make contact with one of the major galactic powers. Then they would either join the galactic community or choose to stay isolated on their home worlds. "What's their destination?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. They appear to be exploring." "Their course is somewhat random, moving from star system to star system. Typical," Veltar said. "New species always want to see what's out there before they realize how big and dangerous the galaxy really is." He looked at the human ship again. It was moving slowly, much slower than even the most basic Zephyrian civilian craft. The humans probably thought they were moving fast, but by galactic standards, they were crawling through space. "Should we make contact, sir?" asked Morek. Veltar thought about it. The Zephyrian Empire had strict protocols for dealing with new species. Usually, they would observe for a while before making any contact. This gave them time to learn about the newcomers and decide if they were friendly or dangerous. But these humans looked completely harmless. Their ship was barely functional by galactic standards. They had no weapons that the scanners could detect. They were probably just a peaceful exploration mission trying to map their local area of space. "Continue monitoring," he decided. "Log everything according to first contact protocols. If they enter our territorial space, we'll need to make formal contact. Until then, just watch and learn." On the USS Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge looking at the stars. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes. He had been in space for most of his adult life, but he still loved the view. Earth was now months behind them, and they were farther from home than any human had ever traveled. "How are we doing on supplies, Amy?" he asked his chief engineer. Lieutenant Amy Brooks looked up from her console. She was a small woman with oil, stains on her uniform, and a tired smile. "We're good for another 6 months, Captain. The recycling systems are working better than expected." "And our fuel situation?" "That's where it gets interesting," Amy said. "I've been making some modifications to the fusion reactor. We're actually getting better efficiency than the designers thought possible." Jake raised an eyebrow. Amy was known for her creative solutions to technical problems. Sometimes her ideas seemed crazy, but they usually worked. "What kind of modifications?" he asked. "Well, I noticed that if we adjust the magnetic containment field in a specific way, we can get the fuel to burn more completely. It's not exactly what the manual says to do, but it works." Navigator Lisa Park turned from her station. She was young and enthusiastic, always excited about their journey. "Captain, I'm picking up some unusual readings ahead. There might be artificial structures in the next system." Jake felt his heart speed up a little. They had been hoping to find signs of other intelligent life, but so far they had only found empty star systems and dead planets. "What kind of structures?" he asked. "Hard to tell from this distance, but the energy signatures don't match anything natural." Jake looked at his crew. They were all volunteers who had left Earth to explore the unknown. They knew the risks, but they also knew they might be the first humans to meet alien life. "Set course for the structures," he ordered, "but keep us at a safe distance. We don't know what we're dealing with." As the USS Liberty changed course, the Zephyrian monitoring station tracked every move. Commander Veltar watched the human ship turn toward their outer system. "Sir," said Morek, "they're heading directly for monitoring post Alpha 3. "Interesting," Veltar said. "Either they detected our installation, or they're just investigating anything that looks artificial." "Should we warn the post?" "No need. Alpha 3 is fully automated and well shielded. The humans won't be able to detect it unless they get very close. But this does mean they'll be entering our territorial space within the next few hours." Veltar made his decision. "Prepare a contact team. It looks like we're about to make first contact with humanity." Neither the humans nor the Zephyrians knew that this meeting would change everything they thought they knew about what was possible in the universe. Science Officer Kethrall had been studying alien technologies for over 40 years. He had seen ships from hundreds of different species, and he could usually predict their capabilities just by looking at their energy signatures. But the human ship was making him very confused. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, adjusting his scanning equipment for the third time. The readings kept coming back the same, but they were impossible. Commander Veltar walked over to the science station. "What's the problem, Kethrall?" "Sir, I'm getting some very strange readings from the human vessel. On the surface, everything looks normal. Basic fusion reactor, simple ion drive, primitive life support systems. Exactly what you'd expect from a species that just learned space travel." "But?" Veltar could hear the confusion in his science officer's voice. "But the deeper scans are showing energy patterns that shouldn't exist. Look at this." Kethrall brought up a detailed display of the human ship's power systems. "Their fusion reactor is producing energy, but not in any way I've ever seen before." Veltar studied the readings. He wasn't a scientist, but he had enough training to understand basic energy signatures. What he was seeing made no sense. The fusion reaction is somehow more efficient than it should be, Kethrall continued. "According to our physics, they should be getting maybe 70% efficiency from their reactor design. but they're getting close to 95%. Scanner. Error? Veltar suggested. I've checked the equipment twice. Everything is working perfectly. Sir, I think they've somehow modified their reactor to work better than the laws of physics say it should. On the USS Liberty, Lieutenant Amy Brooks was in the engine room, making another adjustment to the reactor. She had been working on the fusion system for weeks, trying to squeeze every bit of performance out of their limited equipment. Computer, adjust magnetic field strength to 0.75, she said. Warning, the computer replied in its flat mechanical voice. Adjustment will put reactor outside safe operating parameters. Yeah, I know, Amy said. Do it anyway. The computer made the adjustment. Amy watched as the energy output increased by another 2%. She smiled and wiped sweat from her forehead. The modifications she was making weren't in any manual, but they worked. The truth was, Amy didn't fully understand why her changes worked. She just knew that if she adjusted the magnetic fields in a certain way, the fusion reaction became more efficient. It was like the atoms wanted to fuse more completely when she gave them a little extra push in the right direction. Brooks to bridge, she said into her communicator. Go ahead, Amy, came Captain Morrison's voice. I've got another 2% efficiency gain. We're now running at 96% efficiency on the reactor. There was a pause. Amy, our best Earth reactors only hit 70% efficiency. How is that possible? Honestly, Captain, I'm not sure. I just keep finding little improvements here and there. It's like the reactor wants to work better than it was designed to. Dr. Carl Stone, the ship's scientist, had been listening to the conversation from his lab. He was a thin man with wild hair who loved solving puzzles. Amy's reactor modifications had been keeping him awake at night, trying to figure out how they worked. Amy, he called over the ship's intercom. Can you send me the latest power readings? Already on their way, Doc. Carl looked at the data on his computer screen. The numbers were impossible, but they were real. Amy was somehow making the fusion reaction work better than the best theoretical models said it could. He started writing equations on a piece of paper, trying to understand what was happening. After an hour of calculations, he came up with a theory that made him excited and nervous at the same time. Brooks, can you come to the lab? He called. Amy arrived 10 minutes later, still covered in grease from working on the reactor. What's up, Doc? I think I know why your modifications work, Carl said, showing her his calculations. You're not just making the fusion more efficient. You're actually creating tiny space-time distortions that make the reaction work in a slightly different dimension. Amy looked at the math. She understood some of it, but Carl was much better with theoretical physics. Are you saying I'm bending space? In a very small way, yes. These micro-distortions are allowing the fusion reaction to work more efficiently than normal physics would allow. Is that dangerous? Carl thought about it. Probably not. The distortions are very small and very stable. But Amy, this is incredible. You've accidentally discovered a way to manipulate space-time using basic equipment. Back on the Zephyrian monitoring station, Catherall was reaching the same conclusion through his own analysis. But he was much more shocked than excited. Sir, he called to Commander Veltar, I need to speak with you privately. They went to Veltar's office. Catherall activated the privacy shield before speaking. Commander, what I'm about to tell you could change our understanding of physics. The humans have somehow created stable micro-wormholes using their primitive reactor. Veltar sat down heavily. Micro-wormholes? That's impossible. It takes massive amounts of exotic matter and energy to create even the smallest space-time distortion. That's what I thought too, but look at these readings. Kethrall showed him the detailed scans. The humans are generating these distortions using nothing but modified magnetic fields and some creative engineering. How is that possible? I don't know, sir. It shouldn't be possible. According to everything we know about physics, their reactor should have exploded by now. Instead, it's running better than reactors that cost 1,000 times more to build. Veltar looked out the window at the distant human ship. 12 primitive beings in a crude metal vessel had somehow accomplished something that the greatest Zephyrian scientists said was impossible. Have you contacted the Science Academy about this? Not yet, sir. I wanted to be absolutely sure before I made such an incredible claim. Make sure. Run every test you can think of. If this is real, we need to contact the High Command immediately. Meanwhile, on the USS Liberty, Captain Morrison was talking with his crew about their mission. They had no idea that they were being watched, or that their simple engineering solutions were causing a revolution in alien understanding of physics. How much longer until we reach the next star system? Morrison asked. Navigator Lisa Park checked her instruments. About 6 hours. At current speed, Captain. Any sign of life in that system? The long-range sensors are picking up what might be artificial structures, but I can't be sure from this distance. Communications Officer Kate Bell looked up from her station. Captain, I'm getting some strange readings on the communication array. It's like someone is scanning us, but the signals are very faint. Morrison frowned. Could it be natural phenomena? I don't think so, sir. The patterns are too regular. If I didn't know better, I'd say someone was trying to get detailed information. About our ship. Keep monitoring it, Morrison ordered. If we're being watched, I want to know about it. Kate nodded and went back to her instruments. She had no idea that her simple human communication equipment was somehow detecting Zephyrian scans that should have been completely invisible to primitive technology. On the monitoring station, scanner technician Morek noticed something disturbing. Sir, I think the humans are detecting our scans. Commander Veltar looked at her readings. That's impossible. Our scanning technology is centuries ahead of theirs. I know, sir. But their communication array just changed frequency 3 times, and each time it seemed to be trying to track our scan beams. Veltar shook his head. First impossible physics, now impossible detection capabilities. These humans were starting to worry him. Kethrall, he called. Add this to your analysis. The humans might be more advanced than they appear. Chief Engineer Pete Davis was having the best day of his life. He had just figured out how to make their faster-than-light communications system work with spare parts from the storage room. It wasn't supposed to be possible, but Pete had never been one to worry about what was supposed to work. Kate, try the communicator now, he called to the bridge. Communications Officer Kate Bell activated the system. Instead of the usual static, she heard a clear signal coming from Earth. Pete, this is incredible. I'm getting a signal from home and we're light years away. How did you do this? Pete climbed up from the crawl space where he had been working. His uniform was dirty and he had a big smile on his face. Well, I noticed that our regular communication array was picking up some weird signals, so I thought, what if those signals are coming through some kind of space fold? Space fold? Kate asked. Yeah, like a shortcut through space. So I took some parts from the broken sensor array and connected them to the communicator in a way that might let us send signals through the same shortcut. Dr. Carl Stone had been listening from his lab. He rushed to the communication room. Pete, show me exactly what you did. Pete pointed to his modifications. He had connected 3 different systems using cables and components that weren't designed to work together. It looked like a mess, But somehow it was allowing faster-than-light communication. "This shouldn't work," Carl said, studying the setup. "You're using a sensor array as a signal amplifier and somehow creating a stable communication link across impossible distances." "But it does work," Pete said proudly. "I tested it 3 times. We can talk to Earth in real time." Carl ran some quick calculations on his tablet. "Pete, do you realize what you've done? You've created a faster-than-light communication system using basic components and creative wiring. This should require exotic matter and massive energy expenditure." "Nah," Pete said. "It just needed the right connections. Sometimes you have to think outside the box, you know." On the Zephyrian monitoring station, Science Officer Kethrall was having what his species called a mental overload. The human ship was now doing things that made even less sense than before. "Commander," he called to Veltar, "the humans just activated some kind of faster-than-light communication system." Veltar rushed to the science station. "That's impossible. We can barely detect their ship's power signature. They don't have nearly enough energy to create an FTL comlink." "I know, sir. But look at these readings." Kethrall showed him the scanner data. "They're somehow creating a stable subspace channel, using less than 1% of the energy our own FTL communicators require." "How?" "I have no idea. According to our physics, what they're doing should be impossible, but they're doing it anyway." Veltar contacted the Zephyrian Science Academy on the capital world. Within minutes, he was speaking with Director Yel Nash, one of the most respected scientists in the Empire. "Director, we have a situation that requires immediate attention," Veltar began. "Proceed," came the reply. "We've made contact with a primitive species called humans. They appear to be routinely violating several fundamental laws of physics." There was a long pause. "Explain." Veltar sent all of Kethrall's data to the Science Academy. He waited while the director reviewed the information. "Commander," Director Yelnash finally said, "either your equipment is malfunctioning, or these humans have access to technology that surpasses our own understanding of reality." "Our equipment has been tested multiple times, Director. Everything is working perfectly." "Then we have a problem. What the humans are doing should require technology that we estimate is at least 500 years beyond our current capabilities. Yet they appear to be doing it with primitive equipment." Back on the USS Liberty, Captain Morrison was reviewing the day's discoveries with his senior staff. They had no idea that their simple problem-solving was causing panic among the galaxy's most advanced scientists. "So let me understand this correctly," Morrison said. "Amy has increased our reactor efficiency by 26%. Pete has created a faster-than-light communication system from spare parts, and Carl thinks we're accidentally bending space-time." "That's about right, Captain," said Amy. "Though I wouldn't call it bending space-time. I'd call it giving the universe a little nudge to work better." Dr. Carl Stone shook his head. "Amy, what you're doing is theoretically impossible. You're creating stable space-time distortions with basic magnetic field manipulations." "Maybe the theory is wrong," suggested Pete. "I mean, if it works, right?" Carl looked at his calculations again. "Pete, your communication system is using what appears to be natural subspace channels that shouldn't exist. You're somehow detecting and using shortcuts through space that our best theories say are impossible." "Navigator Lisa," Park looked up from her charts. "Speaking of impossible, I've been getting some weird readings from our navigation system. It's like space is softer around our ship." "Softer?" Morrison asked. "It's hard to explain, Captain, but it feels like we could travel faster if we just pushed a little harder against space itself." Amy's eyes lit up. Lisa, what if we combined your navigation modifications with my reactor improvements and Pete's communication breakthrough? What do you mean? Morrison asked. Well, if we're already bending space a little bit, maybe we can bend it a lot. Maybe we can create our own faster-than-light travel system. Carl looked terrified and excited at the same time. Amy, that's incredibly dangerous. We have no idea what we're dealing with. But it might work, Pete added. And we're explorers, right? We're supposed to try new things. Morrison thought about it. They were farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled. They were alone in unknown space, and they had just discovered that their own equipment could do impossible things. How long would it take to test your idea? He asked Amy. Give me and Pete a few hours to run some simulations. If the numbers look good, maybe we can try a small test. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian capital world, an emergency meeting of the Science Council was taking place. The greatest minds in the Empire were trying to understand how a primitive species could accomplish feats that should be impossible. The energy readings are confirmed, announced Chief Scientist Drackle. The humans are creating space-time distortions using less energy than we use to power a simple food processor. How is this possible? Asked another council member. We don't know. Everything we understand about physics says this should be impossible. Either we're wrong about fundamental laws of the universe, or these humans have access to some form of technology that we can't comprehend. Director Yell Nash reviewed the data again. There's another possibility. What if the humans don't know that what they're doing is impossible? What do you mean? What if their ignorance of advanced physics is actually an advantage? What if knowing too much about what's supposed to be impossible actually prevents us from achieving the impossible? The council was silent as they considered this idea. Could it be that their advanced understanding of physics was actually limiting what they could accomplish? Back on the USS Liberty, Amy and Pete had spent 4 hours working on their faster-than-light travel idea. They had connected Amy's reactor modifications to Pete's communication system and Lisa's navigation improvements. Okay, Amy announced to the bridge crew. I think we're ready for a test. What exactly are you planning to test? Asked Morrison. We want to try jumping to the next star system instantly instead of taking 6 hours to get there. Morrison looked at his crew. They were all excited and nervous. And if it doesn't work, then we'll know not to try it again, Pete said with a grin. And if it does work? Carl spoke up quietly. If it works, Captain, we'll have just reinvented space travel. Using spare parts and determination, Morrison made his decision. Do it. Admiral Zexthor was not easily impressed. In his 300 years of service to the Zephyrian Empire, he had seen technologies that could destroy stars and ships that could cross the galaxy in days. But the report from Deep Space Station, Omega-7 had brought him here personally with a full battle fleet. "Show me the human vessel," he ordered from the bridge of his flagship. The main screen displayed the USS Liberty. To Admiral Zexthor, it looked like a piece of space junk held together with hope and determination. But according to the reports, this crude vessel had just violated several fundamental laws of physics. "Admiral," reported his science officer, "the human ship just appeared in this system. One moment it wasn't there, the next moment it was. No energy buildup, no space-time distortion warnings, nothing. How is that possible?" "We don't know, sir. Our best FTL drives require massive energy expenditure and create detectable distortions in space-time. The humans seem to have jumped. Here without any of that." Admiral Zexthor studied the readings. "What's their current status?" "They appear to be scanning the system, sir. Standard exploration patterns. They seem to be unaware of our presence. On the USS Liberty, Captain Morrison and his crew were celebrating their successful faster-than-light jump. They had traveled 6 light years in less than a second, and everyone was amazed that it had actually worked. "Amy, that was incredible," Morrison said. "How did you know it would work?" Lieutenant Amy Brooks shrugged. "I didn't know it would work. I just thought it was worth trying. The worst that could happen was nothing, right?" Dr. Carl Stone was frantically taking readings and checking his instruments. "Amy, what we just did should have required the energy output of a small star. But according to my readings, we barely used more power than normal flight operations." "Maybe our instruments are wrong," suggested Pete Davis. "I've checked them twice. Everything is working perfectly. We just perform faster-than-light travel using a fraction of the energy that should be required." Navigator Lisa Park looked up from her station. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple ships in this system, big ones." Morrison felt his stomach drop. "How many ships?" "At least 20, sir. They're much larger than us, and they're moving in our direction." Communications Officer Kate Bell turned from her console. "Captain, we're being hailed. The signal is coming through on frequencies we've never seen before. Can you understand it?" "Not yet, sir, but give me a few minutes. Maybe I can modify our translation software." Kate worked quickly, using the same creative approach that had become normal for the Liberty's crew. She connected their translation system to Pete's modified communication array and Amy's enhanced computer systems. "Okay, try it now," she announced. A new voice came through the speakers. It sounded formal and slightly mechanical. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Zex Thor of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. You have entered our territory. State your identity and purpose." Morrison took a deep breath. This was it. First contact with an alien species. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel USS Liberty. We are explorers from the planet Earth. We come in peace." There was a pause. Then the alien voice continued. "Captain Morrison, you and your crew will prepare to be boarded. We wish to speak with you directly." "Sir," Amy whispered, "should we run? I think I can get the FTL system working again." Morrison considered it. They were outnumbered 20-1 by ships that were much more advanced than theirs, but running would probably make them look hostile. "No," he decided. "We came out. Here to explore and meet new people, let's meet them." An hour later, Morrison and his senior staff were standing in the shuttle bay of Admiral Zex Thor's flagship. The Zephyrian ship was enormous, easily 100 times larger than the Liberty. Everything was smooth and elegant, with technology. That seemed almost magical. Admiral Zex Thor was tall and blue-skinned, with large dark eyes that seemed to see everything. He approached the human delegation with what looked like curiosity and caution. "Captain Morrison," the Admiral said through a translation device, "I must admit, your species is not what we expected." "What did you expect?" Morrison asked. "Based on your ship's design and technology level, we expected a primitive species that had just discovered space travel. Instead, we find beings who can perform feats that our greatest scientists consider impossible." Dr. Carl Stone stepped forward. "What do you mean by impossible? Your ship's faster-than-light jump, for example. According to our understanding of physics, what you did should require massive amounts of exotic matter and energy that could power a city. Yet you appear to have done it with basic equipment." Carl looked confused. "We just connected a few systems together and tried something new. Amy figured out how to make the reactor more efficient. Pete created a communication link and I ran. Some calculations, nothing too complicated." Admiral Zex Thor's science officer, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Sir, with respect, what they describe as nothing too complicated would be considered breakthrough discoveries by our Science Academy. Each modification they made advances our understanding of physics by decades. Amy Brooks laughed. Really? We just fix problems as they came up. When something doesn't work the way it's supposed to, you try different things until you find something that does work. But you modified a fusion reactor to operate at 96% efficiency, the Zephyrian scientist protested. That should be impossible with your technology level. Well, Amy said, nobody told the reactor it was impossible, so it just worked. Pete Davis nodded. Same thing with the communicator. The manual said it couldn't do faster than light communication, but when I connected it to some other systems, it worked anyway. Admiral Zex Thor looked at his science officer, who appeared to be having some kind of mental breakdown. Dr. Cravol, are you all right? Sir, Dr. Cravol said slowly, I think these humans don't understand that what they're doing is impossible, and somehow that's allowing them to do it anyway. What do you mean? Morrison asked. Dr. Cravol turned to the humans. In our society, we spend years studying what can and cannot be done according to the laws of physics. We learn all the limitations and barriers that exist in the universe. But you appear to approach problems without knowing about these limitations. Is that bad? Kate Bell asked. No, Dr. Cravol said, sounding amazed. I think it might be the greatest advantage any species has ever had. Admiral Zex Thor was beginning to understand. You're saying that our knowledge of what's impossible actually prevents us from achieving the impossible. I think so, sir. When the humans see a problem, they just try to solve it. They don't worry about whether their solution is theoretically possible. They just ask, will this work? Oh, and then they test it. Navigator Lisa Park spoke up. That's exactly right. When our original navigation system started acting weird, I didn't worry about whether it was supposed to work that way. I just tried to understand what it was trying to tell me. And when our reactor wasn't efficient enough, Amy added, I didn't worry about what the manual said was possible. I just tried different things until I found something that worked better. Admiral Zex Thor felt like his understanding of the universe was shifting. Captain Morrison, how long has your species had this approach to problem-solving? Morrison thought about it. I guess we've always been like this. When humans see a problem, we try to fix it. When something doesn't work, we try to make it work. It's just how we think. Remarkable, Admiral Zex Thor said. We may need to completely revise our approach to science and technology. Dr. Cravol was taking notes as fast as he could. Captain Morrison, would your crew be willing to demonstrate some of their modifications? Our Science Academy would be very interested to learn from your methods. Sure, Morrison said. We're happy to share. That's what explorers do, right? We learn from each other. Admiral Zex Thor made a decision that would change galactic history. Captain Morrison, I would like to invite your species to join the Galactic Council, but not as junior members learning from more advanced civilizations. I think the galaxy needs to learn from humanity. The tour of Admiral Zex Thor's flagship was supposed to be a simple cultural exchange. Captain Morrison and his crew were meant to see Zephyrian technology, while the Zephyrians learned about human customs. Instead, it became a series of minor miracles that left the alien crew questioning everything they knew about engineering. This is our main computer core, explained Lieutenant Velkira, the ship's computer specialist. It processes data at speeds that would be impossible for primitive systems. Communications. Officer Kate Bell looked at the massive computer with interest. The system filled an entire room with glowing crystals and flowing energy patterns. It was beautiful, but she noticed something odd. "Why is it running so hot?" she asked. "Hot?" Valkyra looked confused. "The cooling system maintains optimal temperature. But look at those energy flows." Kate pointed to several areas where the light patterns seemed chaotic. "You're losing a lot of efficiency to heat generation. What if you rerouted some of those connections?" "I'm sorry, but that's not possible. The computer core is designed by our greatest engineers. Every connection has been precisely calculated." Kate studied the system for a few more minutes. "Do you have any spare fiber optic cables?" "Yes, but why?" "Well, I think I can reduce your heat generation by about 15%. It would only take a few minutes." Valkyra was shocked. "That's impossible. This computer has been optimized by teams of specialists." "Maybe," Kate said with a smile, "but I work with computers every day, and I can see some places where the data flow could be smoother. Want me to try?" 20 minutes later, the Zephyrian computer core was running 15% cooler and processing data 12% faster. Kate had simply rerouted a few connections and adjusted some settings. What she thought of as basic troubleshooting, the Zephyrians considered breakthrough computer science. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Pete Davis was looking at the ship's faster-than-light drive with fascination. The massive engine filled several rooms and required an entire team of specialists to operate. "This is incredible," Pete said to Chief Engineer Morthak. "But why does it need so much exotic matter?" "The exotic matter creates the space-time distortions necessary for faster-than-light travel," Morthak explained. "Without it, FTL travel would be impossible." Pete looked at the engine specifications on a nearby display. "What if you didn't use exotic matter? What if you just convinced space to bend a little bit?" "I don't understand. Space doesn't bend without massive energy input." "Well, that's not exactly true," Pete said. "Space bends all the time. Gravity bends space, right? What if you just asked space to bend in a specific direction?" Morthak was getting frustrated. "You can't just ask space to do anything. Physics doesn't work that way." "Can I see your engine?" "Specifications?" Morthak pulled up the complex diagrams. Pete studied them for a few minutes, then pointed to several components. "What if you removed these exotic matter injectors and replaced them with a simple magnetic field generator? Then you could create small space-time ripples instead of big distortions." "That would never work," Morthak said firmly. "The energy requirements would be impossible to meet." "Actually," Pete said, "it might work really well. You'd use less energy and get better performance. Want me to show you?" In the medical bay, Dr. Susan Clark was meeting with Chief Medical Officer Drayson. The Zephyrian medical technology was amazing, with devices that could heal injuries in minutes and diagnose problems instantly. "Your medical science is very advanced," Susan said, watching a scanner that could see inside a patient's body in perfect detail. "Thank you," Drayson replied. "We have spent centuries perfecting our healing techniques. I notice you use a lot of energy to power your medical devices. What if you didn't need so much power? Our devices require precise energy levels to function properly. Any reduction in power would compromise their effectiveness." Susan looked at a healing device that was treating a minor injury on a Zephyrian crew member. "What if you pulsed the energy instead of using a constant stream? The body might respond better to rhythmic healing energy." "That's not how medical devices work," Drayson said. "Continuous energy application is the only way to ensure proper healing. Well, on Earth, we've found that the body has natural healing. Rhythms. If you match those rhythms with your healing energy, you might get better results with less power. Drawson looked skeptical, but he was curious enough to try Susan's suggestion. They modified one of the healing devices to pulse its energy in sync with the patient's natural biorhythms. The results were immediate. The healing process accelerated by 40% while using 30% less energy. Drawson stared at his instruments in disbelief. "How did you know that would work?" he asked. "I didn't know," Susan said. "I just thought it was worth trying. Sometimes the simple approaches work better than the complicated ones." Meanwhile, in the ship's security section, Security Chief Dan Price was talking with Commander Yeldar about defensive systems. The Zephyrian ship had shields that could stop almost any weapon and sensors that could detect threats from vast distances. "Your security systems are impressive," Dan said, looking at the complex defensive arrays. "But I notice you have some blind spots." "Blind spots?" Commander Yeldar was offended. "Our defensive grid has been designed by military experts. There are no blind spots." Dan pointed to several areas on the security display. "What about these zones? Your sensors overlap here, here, and here. But there are gaps in coverage. Those gaps are too small for any ship to exploit." "Maybe," Dan said. "But what if someone didn't use a ship? What if they used something smaller and smarter?" "Commander." Yeldar looked at the areas Dan had identified. He had never noticed the gaps before because his training taught him to focus on ship-sized threats. "What would you suggest?" he asked. "Simple fix," Dan said. "Rotate your sensor pattern by 15 degrees and add some random movement to the scanning frequency. It would close all the gaps and make you much harder to sneak up on." "That's actually a very good idea," Commander Yeldar admitted. "Why didn't our military engineers think of that?" Maybe they were too focused on complex solutions to notice the simple one. By the end of the day, Captain Morrison's crew had inadvertently improved every major system on Admiral Zexthor's flagship. They had done it using simple logic, creative thinking, and a willingness to try new approaches. Admiral Zexthor called a meeting with his senior staff. "Report," he ordered. "Sir," said Chief Engineer Morthak, "the humans have improved our FTL drive efficiency by 22% using modifications that should be impossible. Our computer systems are running 12% faster thanks to simple rewiring suggested by their communications officer," added Lieutenant Velkira. "Their doctor improved our medical healing rates by 40%, with a technique so simple, I'm embarrassed I never thought of it," reported Drawson. "And their security officer identified defensive gaps that our best military engineers missed," concluded Commander Yeldar. Admiral Zexthor was quiet for a long moment. "How is it possible that a primitive species can improve our technology so easily?" Dr. Crevol, who had been observing the humans all day, spoke up. "Admiral, I don't think they're primitive at all. I think they're the most advanced problem solvers in the galaxy." "Explain." "Every other species, including us, has developed advanced knowledge about what is and isn't possible. We've become limited by our own expertise, but the humans approach every problem with a fresh perspective. They don't assume something won't work just because it's not supposed to work." "You're saying our knowledge is holding us back?" "Yes, sir. The humans have shown me that the greatest barrier to innovation isn't lack of knowledge. It's the assumption that we already know everything." Admiral Zexthor looked out at the stars. "Contact the Galactic Council. Tell them we need to arrange an emergency session. The galaxy is about to learn some very important lessons from humanity." Captain Morrison joined him at the observation deck. Admiral, my crew is amazed by your technology. We've learned so much today. Captain, Admiral Zex Thor said quietly, I think we've learned far more from you than you've learned from us. Your crew has just revolutionized our understanding of engineering, medicine, security, and computer science. All in one afternoon. Morrison looked surprised. We just tried to be helpful. That's what people do, right? And that, Admiral Zex Thor realized, was exactly what made humanity so remarkable. The emergency meeting of the Zephyrian Science Academy was the largest gathering of brilliant minds in the Empire's history. Scientists, engineers, and philosophers had come from across the galaxy to discuss what they were calling the human phenomenon. Director Yell Nash stood before the assembly, looking at data that challenged everything they thought they knew about intelligence and problem-solving. Fellow scientists, he began, we are here to discuss a discovery that may change our understanding of intelligence itself. The human species appears to possess a cognitive ability that no other known species has demonstrated. Dr. Crevol, who had spent 3 days observing the human crew, stepped forward to present his findings. I have identified what I believe to be the key difference between human thinking and our own. We call it limitation blindness. Explain, requested Chief Scientist Drakel. Every species we have encountered, including ourselves, develops knowledge about what is possible and what is impossible. We learn these limitations early in our education, and they become part of how we think. When we see a problem, we automatically consider whether our solution is theoretically possible before we try it. That seems logical, said another scientist. Yes, but humans don't do this. When they see a problem, they focus entirely on solving it. They don't spend time worrying about whether their solution should work according to existing theory. They just try things until something works. Dr. Crevol activated a holographic display showing examples from the human crew's work. When Engineer Brooks wanted to improve reactor efficiency, she didn't consult theoretical limits. She just started making adjustments until the reactor worked better. When Engineer Davis wanted faster-than-light communication, he didn't worry about energy requirements. He just connected systems until he achieved the result he wanted. But that's not scientific, protested one Academy member. You need to understand the theory before you can make practical improvements. That's exactly what I thought, Dr. Crevol said. But the humans have proven us wrong. Their approach is actually more scientific than ours because they test everything through experimentation rather than limiting themselves with preconceived notions. Director Yelnash brought up another display. Dr. Cravol's observations are supported by additional data. In the past 3 days, human crew members have improved 17 different Zephyrian technologies. Technologies that our best engineers spent decades perfecting. The assembly was quiet as they absorbed this information. How is this possible? Asked Dr. Wexlon from the Engineering Institute. I believe it's because humans treat every problem as if it's the first time anyone has ever encountered it, Dr. Crevol explained. They don't assume that previous solutions are the best solutions. They approach everything with what they call beginner's mind. On the USS Liberty, the human crew was completely unaware that their problem-solving methods were causing a revolution in galactic scientific thinking. They were busy working on their next project. Okay, said Chief Engineer Pete Davis. Admiral Zex Thor asked us to look at their planetary shield generators. Apparently, they're having efficiency problems. Dr. Carl Stone pulled up the technical specifications on his tablet. These shields protect entire planets from asteroid impacts and solar radiation. The engineering is incredible, but I can see why they're having problems. "What do you see?" asked Captain Morrison. "The shield generators are trying to create a perfect protective barrier around the entire planet. That requires enormous amounts of energy because they're fighting against the planet's gravity, magnetic field, and atmospheric pressure all at the same time." Lieutenant Amy Brooks looked at the diagrams. "What if they didn't fight against those forces? What if they used them instead?" "What do you mean?" Carl asked. "Well, the planet already has a magnetic field, right? And an atmosphere that blocks most harmful radiation. What if the shield generators just enhanced what was already there instead of trying to replace it?" Pete nodded enthusiastically. "Amy's right. Instead of creating an artificial barrier, they could just strengthen the natural barriers that already exist." Navigator Lisa Park was studying the orbital mechanics. And if they synchronized the shield pulses with the planet's rotation, they could get better coverage with less energy. Communications Officer Kate Bell looked up from her workstation. "I could probably set up a communication network between all the generators so they work together instead of independently." Dr. Carl Stone started running calculations. "If we combined all these approaches, the energy requirements would drop by about 70% while increasing shield effectiveness by 40%. Captain Morrison smiled. His crew was doing it again. They were taking an incredibly complex problem and finding a simple solution that worked better than what the galaxy's best engineers had designed. Back at the Science Academy, Dr. Crayvole was presenting his most shocking finding. "I believe that human intelligence represents a new evolutionary approach to problem solving. While other species have evolved to become experts in specific areas, humans have evolved to remain permanently curious about everything." "What evidence supports this theory?" asked Director Yelnash. "Observe how they learn. When we showed Engineer Brooks our reactor designs, she didn't try to understand our theories first. She immediately started asking, 'What if we tried this? And what would happen if we changed that?' She treated our advanced technology like a puzzle to be solved, not a finished design to be studied." Dr. Crayvole showed video recordings of the human crew working on various problems. "Notice that they never accept any system as perfect. Engineer Davis looked at our faster-than-light drive and immediately started thinking of ways to improve it. Medical Officer Clark examined our healing technology and found ways to make it work better. They seem incapable of looking at any technology without thinking of improvements." "Is this behavior beneficial or problematic?" asked Chief Scientist Drackle. "Extremely beneficial. In 3 days, they have advanced our technology more than we have advanced it in the past 50 years. Their refusal to accept limitations has allowed them to achieve things we consider impossible." A younger scientist raised her hand. "Dr. Crayvole, are you suggesting that our educational system is actually hindering our ability to innovate?" "I'm suggesting exactly that," Dr. Crayvole replied. "We teach our students what is possible and what is impossible. Humans seem to learn by assuming everything is possible until proven otherwise." The assembly erupted in discussion. The implications were enormous. If Dr. Crayvole was correct, then the Zephyrian Empire's entire approach to science and education needed to be reconsidered. "Director," Yelnash called for order. "Dr. Crayvole, what do you recommend?" "I recommend that we study human thinking methods intensively. We need to understand how they maintain their limitation blindness and whether other species can learn to think the same way." "And what about immediate practical applications?" "I suggest we invite human advisors to work with our engineering teams on major projects. Their fresh perspective could revolutionize our technology." Meanwhile, on Admiral Zexthor's flagship, the human crew had just finished their work on the planetary shield problem. They had created a solution that was simpler, more effective, and more efficient than anything the Zephyrians had ever imagined. "How long did it take you to develop this solution?" Admiral Zexthor asked Captain Morrison. "About 4 hours," Morrison replied, "though most of that time was spent understanding how your current system works." Admiral Zexthor looked at his engineering staff, who appeared to be in shock. 4 hours to solve a problem that has challenged our best engineers for decades. "Well," said Amy Brooks, "sometimes it helps to have fresh eyes on a problem. We didn't know it was supposed to be difficult, so we just focused on making it work better." That evening, Admiral Zexthor received a priority message from the Science Academy. The greatest minds in the Empire had reached a unanimous conclusion. Humanity represented a new form of intelligence that could revolutionize galactic civilization. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready to learn from its newest and most surprising members. The news of humanity's extraordinary problem-solving abilities spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. Within days of Admiral Zexthor's report, 3 major galactic powers had dispatched their fastest ships to meet these remarkable humans. The first to arrive was the Crystalline Collective, a species of living crystal beings who had mastered energy manipulation over millions of years. Their ship materialized in a flash of pure light near the USS Liberty. "Greetings, humans," came a voice that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Resonance Prime Shaldar. We have come to understand your methods." Captain Morrison welcomed the new aliens aboard his ship, which was beginning to feel very crowded with visitors from 3 different species. The crystalline being was beautiful but alien, looking like a walking sculpture made of glowing gems. "We have heard that you solve impossible problems," Shaldar continued. "Our energy conversion systems have been operating at the same efficiency for 3 million years. We would be interested to see if you can improve them." Chief Engineer Pete Davis looked at the crystalline technology with amazement. Their energy systems were pure crystalline matrices that converted starlight directly into usable power. It was elegant and beautiful, but Pete immediately noticed something. "Why do you only use yellow light?" he asked. "Yellow light provides optimal energy conversion for our crystal matrices," Shaldar explained. "Our science has determined this is the most efficient frequency. But what about all the other colors?" Pete pointed to the rainbow spectrum of light coming from the nearby star. "You're only using maybe 20% of the available energy. The other frequencies cannot be processed by our systems." Pete studied the crystalline matrix for a few minutes. "What if you didn't try to process all the frequencies with the same crystals? What if you used different crystals for different colors?" "That is not how our technology works," Shaldar said firmly. "Maybe not yet," Pete said with a grin. "But what if we tried anyway?" 2 hours later, Pete had helped the crystalline engineers create a multi-spectrum energy collector that increased their power output by 400%. He had simply suggested using different types of crystals arranged in a pattern that captured all frequencies of light instead of just one. The crystalline collective was stunned. In millions of years of technological development, they had never considered using multiple crystal types in the same system. The next aliens to arrive were the Hive Worlds, a collective consciousness that shared thoughts across billions of individuals. Their ship was organic, grown rather than built, and pulsed with living energy. "We are the Hive," spoke their representative through a translation device. "We think as one mind across countless bodies. We have come to study how individual minds can solve problems that collective consciousness cannot." Dr. Carl Stone was fascinated by the Hive's shared consciousness technology. Their ship was essentially a living creature that responded to the collective thoughts of its crew. "Your biotechnology is incredible," Carl said, "but I notice your ship seems to be having trouble making quick decisions." "Decisions require consensus among all members of the collective," the Hive explained. "This ensures accuracy but requires time for consideration." "What if you didn't need consensus for small decisions?" Carl suggested. "What if individual parts of the ship could make routine decisions automatically?" "Individual decision-making leads to errors and inefficiency." Carl thought about this. "Maybe, but it also leads to speed and adaptability. What if you created a hybrid system? The collective consciousness for major decisions, but individual sub-minds for routine operations?" The Hive was initially resistant to this idea, but they agreed to test it. Carl helped them create semi-autonomous subsystems that could handle basic ship operations without waiting for collective approval. The results were dramatic. The ship's response time improved by 300%. And its efficiency increased as the collective mind was freed from micromanaging routine tasks. The third species to arrive was the Ancient Assembly, beings so old that they remembered the formation of the galaxy. Their ships were technological marvels that seemed to bend reality around them. "Young humans," spoke Elder Morthensis, whose voice carried the weight of billions of years. "We have observed the universe since before your son was born. We are curious about your unconventional approaches to problem solving." Navigator Lisa Park was assigned to work with the Ancient Assembly's navigation systems. Their technology was so advanced that it predicted stellar movements thousands of years in advance and could calculate courses through space-time itself. "Your navigation is incredibly sophisticated," Lisa said, studying displays that showed the movement of entire galactic clusters. "But why do you only plan routes through stable space?" "Unstable regions of space-time are dangerous and unpredictable," Elder Morthensis explained. "We avoid them to ensure safe passage." "But they are also faster routes," Lisa pointed out. "If you could find a way to navigate unstable space safely, you could cut travel times by huge amounts." "Impossible. Unstable space cannot be predicted or controlled." Lisa looked at the navigation data differently. Instead of trying to predict where the instabilities would be, she started looking for patterns in how they moved. "What if you didn't try to avoid the instabilities?" she suggested. "What if you rode them like currents in an ocean?" Elder Morthensis was shocked by the suggestion. In billions of years, the Ancient Assembly had always viewed space-time instabilities as obstacles to avoid, never as resources to use. Working together, Lisa and the Ancient Assembly's navigators developed a technique for surfing space-time currents. It was dangerous and required split-second timing, but it could reduce travel times by up to 90%. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity was receiving its first official contact from the galactic community. Ambassador Sarah Martinez stood in the United Nations building, reading a message that would change human history forever. "Citizens of Earth," she announced to the assembled world leaders, "we have been invited to join the Galactic Council as senior advisors on technological innovation and problem solving." "Senior advisors?" asked the Secretary General. "Shouldn't we be junior members, learning from more advanced civilizations?" Ambassador Martinez smiled. "Apparently, the galaxy wants to learn from us. Our crew on the USS Liberty has been improving alien technology faster than they can study it. On the Liberty, Captain Morrison was dealing with an unusual problem. His ship now had representatives from 6 different alien species, all wanting to learn human problem-solving methods. "Captain," said Communications Officer Kate Bell, "I'm getting requests from 47 different alien civilizations. They all want to send delegations to study our crew." 47? Morrison looked overwhelmed. "Actually, make that 52, Kate corrected, looking at new messages. "Word is spreading fast." Chief Medical Officer Susan Clark had been working with alien doctors from all the visiting species. She had discovered that human medical techniques, based on treating the whole patient rather than just symptoms, worked remarkably well on alien biology. "Captain," she reported, "I've been able to improve medical outcomes for all 6 alien species, using basic human approaches. Apparently, we're the only species that focuses on preventing problems instead of just fixing them after they happen." Security Chief Dan Price had been analyzing alien defense systems and finding gaps that their designers had never noticed. "Captain, these aliens are incredibly advanced, but they all have the same weakness. They design their systems to work perfectly under ideal conditions, but they don't plan for chaos." "What do you mean?" Morrison asked. "Humans always assume that something will go wrong, so we build in backup systems and flexibility. These aliens assume their systems will work perfectly, so they don't prepare for failures." Lieutenant Amy Brooks joined the conversation. "Dan's right. Every alien system I've looked at is optimized for perfect conditions, but space isn't perfect. Things break, conditions change, and you have to adapt. So our advantage is that we—" "Expect things to go wrong?" Morrison asked. "Not just that," Pete Davis added. "Our advantage is that we're not afraid of things going wrong. When something breaks, we see it as a challenge to fix, not a disaster to avoid." Captain Morrison looked at his crew. 12 humans on a small exploration ship had somehow managed to revolutionize the technology of multiple galactic civilizations, and they had done it simply by being themselves. "Well," he said with a smile, "I guess we'd better get ready to teach the galaxy how to think like humans." Outside the ship, representatives from dozens of alien civilizations waited their turn to learn from humanity. The galaxy was about to discover that the most powerful technology wasn't advanced machinery or exotic physics. It was the simple human refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. 6 months after first contact, the Galactic Council convened for the most important session in its history. Representatives from over 300 civilizations gathered at the ancient meeting station that orbited the galactic core. For the first time ever, the newest member species would not be sitting in the junior observer section. Humanity had been given a place at the council's center table. Ambassador Sarah Martinez stood before the assembled aliens, representing a species that had only known about galactic civilization for half a year. Behind her sat Captain Morrison and his crew from the USS Liberty, who had somehow become the most famous problem solvers in the galaxy. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Ambassador Martinez began, "humanity is grateful for this opportunity to join your ancient alliance. We come not as students seeking knowledge, but as partners ready to share what we have learned." Elder Morthensis of the Ancient Assembly spoke first. His voice carried the authority of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "Young humans," he said, "in my billions of years of existence, I have never seen a species impact galactic civilization so quickly or so profoundly. Your crew has revolutionized our understanding of technology, medicine, navigation, and problem-solving itself." Resonance. Prime Shaldar of the Crystalline Collective added, "The human approach to engineering has increased our energy efficiency by 400%. We had achieved perfection in our systems over millions of years, yet humans showed us we had barely begun to explore what was possible. Admiral Zexthor stood to address the council. The Zephyrian Empire has completely restructured our educational system based on human thinking methods. We are teaching our students to question everything and assume nothing is impossible. The representative of the Hive Worlds spoke next. The collective consciousness has voted to adopt human-style individual decision-making in our subsystems. Our efficiency has increased beyond our previous calculations. Ambassador Martinez listened as species after species described how human thinking had transformed their civilizations. It was overwhelming to realize that Earth's greatest export wasn't technology or resources, but a way of thinking about problems. The question before us today, announced Council Chairman Velthor, is how to integrate human problem-solving methods into galactic civilization. We have identified 3 key principles that make human thinking unique. The main display showed the analysis that galactic scientists had spent months developing. First, humans approach every problem as if it has never been solved before. They do not assume that existing solutions are optimal. Chief Engineer Pete Davis nodded from his seat. That was exactly how he approached broken equipment. Every malfunction was a new puzzle to solve, not a reference to look up in a manual. Second, humans are willing to try solutions that should not work according to existing theory. They test ideas through experimentation rather than theoretical analysis. Lieutenant Amy Brooks smiled. She had been breaking physics for months, and it kept working anyway. Third, humans expect systems to fail and design accordingly. They build flexibility and redundancy into everything, assuming that conditions will change and problems will arise. Security Chief Dan Price had been trying to explain this concept to alien engineers for weeks. Humans didn't just design systems to work perfectly. They designed them to keep working when everything went wrong. Chairman Velthor continued, based on these principles, the Council has decided to establish human advisory centers throughout the galaxy. These centers will be staffed by human problem solvers who will work with local species to apply human thinking methods to their challenges. The announcement caused excited discussion among the alien representatives. Some civilizations had been waiting months for access to human advisors. Additionally, the chairman added, we are establishing the Galactic Institute for Applied Human Thinking. This institute will study human problem-solving methods and teach them to other species. Dr. Carl Stone looked amazed. Earth was about to become the galaxy's center for innovation and creative thinking. But the biggest surprise came next. Finally, Chairman Velthor announced, the Council has voted to adopt the human approach as our standard method for addressing galactic challenges. From this day forward, we will assume that every problem has a solution, and that solution can be found through creativity, experimentation, and persistence. The chamber erupted in approving sounds from hundreds of different species. For the first time in galactic history, the Council had unanimously agreed to change their fundamental approach to problem solving. Ambassador Martinez felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Humanity was no longer just a member of galactic civilization. They were its teachers. We accept this responsibility with humility, she said. But I want to share the most important lesson we've learned. The power of human thinking isn't really about humans at all. The chamber grew quiet as aliens from across the galaxy listened. What we've discovered is that every species has the capacity to think creatively and solve impossible problems. The only thing that stops us is the belief that some things can't be done. Navigator Lisa Park stood up. When I first started working with alien navigation systems, I thought they were too advanced for me to understand. But then I realized that navigation is navigation. Whether you're flying between planets or between galaxies, the principles are the same. Communications Officer. Kate Bell added, I've worked with communication systems from 6 different species now. They all seemed impossibly complex at first. But once I stopped worrying about how they were supposed to work and started focusing on how they actually worked, everything became clear. Chief Medical Officer Susan Clark spoke next. Alien biology seemed completely foreign to me initially, but then I realized that all living things have the same basic needs: energy, repair mechanisms, and balance. Once I focused on those basics, I could help anyone. Captain Morrison stood to address the council. My crew isn't special because we're human. We're effective because we refuse to believe that problems can't be solved. Any species can learn to think this way. Elder Morthensis considered this carefully. Captain Morrison, are you suggesting that the secret to human success is simply refusing to accept limitations? That's part of it, Morrison replied. But the real secret is curiosity. We never stop asking what if and why not. We treat every problem like it's the most interesting puzzle we've ever seen. The ancient assembly's representative was quiet for a long moment. In my billions of years of existence, I have accumulated vast knowledge about what is possible and what is impossible. Perhaps it is time to forget some of what I know and remember how to be curious again. The session continued for hours as representatives from across the galaxy shared their experiences with human problem-solving methods. Species that had been stuck with the same technologies for millions of years were making breakthrough discoveries. Civilizations that had accepted limitations were finding new possibilities. As the session concluded, Chairman Velthor made one final announcement. The USS Liberty will be preserved as a monument to human ingenuity, but it will also serve as a working laboratory where beings from across the galaxy can come to learn human thinking methods. Lieutenant Amy Brooks looked surprised. You want to turn our ship into a school? Not just a school, the chairman replied. A symbol. A reminder that the most powerful force in the universe isn't advanced technology or ancient wisdom. It's the willingness to look at any problem and say, let's see what happens if we try this. Captain Morrison felt a sense of pride and responsibility. His crew had set out to explore the galaxy and discover new worlds. Instead, they had taught the galaxy to rediscover the joy of discovery itself. As the council session ended and representatives from hundreds of worlds prepared to return home, they carried with them more than just new technologies and techniques. They carried a new way of thinking about what was possible. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest secret. The universe was full of impossible things waiting to become possible. All it took was someone willing to try. Chief Engineer Pete Davis summed it up perfectly as he watched alien ships departing for their home worlds. You know what the best part is? He said to his crewmates. We're just getting started. If we can do all this with one small ship and 12 people, imagine what we can accomplish when the whole galaxy starts thinking like humans. The age of limitations was ending. The age of possibility had begun, and it all started because 12 humans refused to accept that anything was truly impossible.